These are the faces of the persecuted victims of unspeakable violent atrocities because of their religious beliefs. Persecution of Christians in particular has existed since as early as the Roman Empire during the reign of Nero, and it continues to this very day around the world.
Persecution today worldwide is worsening than the previous centuries combined. And there are over 40 countries that Christians are serving in prisons from a few months to life in prison. And these are happening from Iran to India, from Nigeria to North Korea, from Sudan to China, and many other countries.
Religious persecution in China in particular is a dire problem. Chinese citizens can be abused by their government for exercising their basic human right to express their faith. The only religion that is tolerated in China is controlled by the Chinese government.
The Three Self Church stands for self-propagating, self-supporting, and self-governing. It is a political organization with religious uniform designed by the Communist Party to control the church, to even eliminate the church. And it was functioned to report and penetrate independent churches in China.
Yet in spite of the repression, the underground church in China is exploding, with an estimated 100 million believers worshiping in unregistered house churches. To prevent them from worshiping, government officials will detain, arrest, interrogate, convict, imprison, beat, and even torture innocent faith practitioners in order to strike fear into the hearts of other believers and to maintain a rigid control over the society.
The Christians are being persecuted in different ways. The believer could be taken away and being beaten and electric shocked and even tortured, and even sentenced to many years in prison, even to life. And the independent churches, their buildings, could be destroyed and bulldozed and even bombed.
I have experienced arrest, detention, and other persecutions 37 times.
The international community can help by raising awareness concerning these human rights abuses in China. One organization that is shedding light on these gross violations in China and changing lives is China Aid, based in Midland, Texas.
The ways that China Aid has been providing support for the persecuted in China are, number one, being a voice for these voiceless brothers and sisters as an advocate in the free world. Number two, to provide financial aid to the victims and the family of the prisoners. Number three is to provide legal aid for those persecuted in the court.
China Aid walks with the persecuted faithful and believes that the enforcement of rule of law is essential to preserving religious freedom. China Aid works to apply this philosophy to a grassroots model of growth and change.
Religious freedom can change the face of China as the first freedom among all the freedoms. As many people in China said, one more Christian, one less criminal. One more church, one less prison. And by pushing and advancing religious freedom, China will become a more stable, less corrupt, and more civil society for the future.
One morning in October 2006, 3 policemen from the Beijing Public Security Bureau took me to a hotel and detained me from 9 a.m. to 3 p.m. They didn't give me lunch, but interrogated me over 6 hours. They asked me, "What have you done over the past 2 years? What relationship do you have with the China Aid Association? There are 8 public security bureaus from 8 provinces chasing you. What have you done? We have to stop your work related to religious freedom."
China Aid works in China to defend the rights of the persecuted by networking with Chinese legal professionals to take on civil and religious cases in court. Outside of China, it campaigns to raise awareness about religious persecution and human rights abuses in China.
The ways that our legal aid impact the persecuted church is, despite the fact that we do not win every legal battle, yet we do reduce the sentences of these prisoners. we do reduce even the level of persecution. And many times, by fighting the legal battle in the court, we educate both the grassroots leaders and the court lawyers and the judges on the spirit of the rule of law.
When I faced the most dangerous and difficult time in my life, it was the China Aid Association who appealed to the international community to pay attention to my case, and it forced the Chinese government to release me after I was imprisoned for over half a year. My original sentence was re-education through hard labor for 3 years.
In China, China Aid is training pastors and house church leaders on how to defend their rights according to the law. In addition to providing legal assistance, it also offers charitable funding to families of prisoners of conscience.
Chinese house churches will make 2 great contributions to democracy: the legal system and even culture reform and renewal. These contributions will provide the basis that will help the country become better. It is a blessing from God.
I have done much defending of rights to protect churches and Christian religious freedoms for the last 4 years. My deep feeling is the defending of rights is the best way to protect churches and Christians from the persecutions of local PSBs. This is our weapon of law.
I decided to support Bob and China Aid when I realized how much they reminded me of the believers in chapter 11 of Hebrews, men of whom the Bible says the world was not worthy. And that's exactly how I consider our Chinese brothers and sisters who are undergoing such persecution at the hands of the Chinese government, that the world is not worthy of such men. And we're also admonished to remember our brothers in chains as though we were in prison with them. And this is one of the small ways we can share in their suffering or to knit our hearts together with theirs, is by our prayers and by our tangible gifts.
Persecution is alive and well in China. As China grows in international power and influence, the Chinese government will continue to be a threat to the world of the future.
Americans should be concerned about China and its future because China has become the largest creditor to the US debt. And as Napoleon said, when China wakes up, the whole world shakes. And America has the potential to make China either become a threatening dragon or a peacemaking lamb in this world.
China Aid is advancing religious freedom in China by exposing the abuses, encouraging the abused, and equipping leaders on behalf of the persecuted church. To learn more about China Aid and how you can lend your support, visit ChinaAid.org.